Chapter 2. Good News and Bad News. After being dropped off by the school bus, we went our separate ways, which wasn't far apart. Kenya lived right next door to me. As soon as I stepped through the front door, I was greeted by Papa Red and Mama. My granddaddy's name is Emerson Moore, but depending on his mood, sometimes I'd shorten it and just call him Red. Papa Red. Like mostly everyone in my family, Papa Red had a light complexion, and when he got mad, which was not a lot these days, except when he was fussing with his son, his face would get as red as a stop sign. He was a big man who'd worked hard in his day. The stiffness in his walk was because of a war-related injury and many years of hard labor. "Lois, you need to start feeding this boy more often. Looks like he's getting skinnier," said Red loud enough so that Mama could hear him from the kitchen. Afterward, he drew in from his wooden pipe that he'd just lit and blew thick white smoke into the air. The rich aroma of tobacco always made me feel good, but today I could tell that the reasoning behind the smoke was stress-related. Something was out of place. "Hey, Red, did you get some bait today?" Papa Red was a great fisherman. We'd go out Saturday mornings when the weather was good and try to fish everything out of the creek. "I'm sorry, son, but we ain't going fishing this weekend." Before I could ask why, I heard Mama put down the dishes in the kitchen. She came out, drying her hands. Mama was a plump woman, not fat, but hefty in her own beautiful way. I once heard a man catcall her Bubbalicious, whatever that meant. Those types of things always got my attention more than hers. I hated when men did stupid things like that, especially to my mama. She was bright-skinned like the rest of the Moore family, with thick reddish hair that she liked to wear in two big afro puffs. She had a way about her that lit up a room. Normally kind-hearted, she also had a side that I feared to see. "Hey, big boy!" Why she insisted on calling me big boy then, I didn't know at the time, but would soon find out. "Hey, Mama, how was your day?" "Oh, it was good. How about yours?" Instead of saying what I felt, which was a little pain in my side and a bigger pain in my stomach, I told her that I was good, but would be a lot better if I were still going fishing. "Well, son," said Papa Red, "the reason we're not going fishing is your Aunt Eleanor is sick, and we need to get to New York to see her." All I could remember about Aunt Eleanor was that she liked Mama a lot. She would say things like, "Lois, you still look so pretty, and this boy of yours got a face as smooth as ice." She'd give Mama money for herself and money to buy me things, and she'd give me more money when nobody else was around. I always thought that maybe Aunt Eleanor was rich. Then it hit me. "What's wrong? Is she dying or something? What's wrong with her?" I asked. Being that she was Papa Red's sister, I guess he saw fit that he told me. "Son, she's going into the hospital for surgery. It's nothing for you to worry about, but we need to be there to show her our support." Even though he tried downplaying it, it must have been pretty serious, because both Mama and Red looked sad about the whole thing. "Since you only have a week left of school, going to New York shouldn't be a problem," said Mama. My class had stopped doing real schoolwork. We'd started watching movies and playing games the week before. It wouldn't be an issue with me getting out early at all. "Hey, y'all, what's up?" said Uncle Ricky as he came out of the kitchen. It was still early in the day, and he was drunk already. My mother's only brother was the youngest drunk I knew. Every day after work, Uncle Ricky, who kept his beer in an old refrigerator in Papa Red's barn, had a habit of coming through the back door, which was located in the kitchen, after cracking open a cold bottle of beer. And just as I had seen so many times before, he was holding a bottle of beer in one hand and a tall glass in the other, readying himself for his daily routine. He'd come home from work, kick off his stinky work boots, pour himself a few beers, and watch TV all night. Just like I loved all of my family, I loved Uncle Ricky. It was just that I knew he could do a lot better than what he was doing. I'd heard several times from Mama and others that in high school, he was the best basketball player at Batham Island High, or in the Low Country for that matter. In college, he was being looked at by NBA scouts. At 6 feet 5 inches tall, he stuck out like a sore thumb as a mechanic at Roscoe's. Once I overheard Red say that some girl messed his head up. He hadn't picked up a basketball the same since. All he was good for now was changing tires and drinking beer. "Ricky, take your feet off the table," said Papa Red. What's going on? Why does everybody look so down?" Ricky asked. Just then the phone rang. Mama went to the kitchen to see who was calling. Using her head to hold the phone to her shoulder, she hurried to dry her hands. Keeping the phone tight to her ear, she motioned for a pen and paper. Uncle Ricky pulled out an oily pad from his back pocket and a pen from his shirt and handed it over. "Okay. Harlem Hospital Center," she said as she scribbled on the pad. Her face had suddenly gone from bad to worse. She hung up the phone, turned to Papa Red and said, "She's in intensive care." "Ricky," said Papa Red nervously, "we gotta hurry up and get to New York, so put down the beer. We gotta go." "All right, I'm coming," said Uncle Ricky before guzzling down the entire 12 ounces of pee. He wiped foam from his mouth with the back of his hand. We might need to get some rest before we go, don't you think?" he asked. Mama and Red had already gone off to pack. I'd never seen Mama move so fast and with such shaky hands. "Mama, is she gonna be okay?" "Baby, that'll be up to God. If he sees fit, she'll be just fine. Aunt Eleanor is getting up in age, but she is one of the strongest women I know. For now, all we can do is pray." "Have I ever told you about the time she choked a wild dog with her bare hands?" she said while searching her clothes. "I don't think so," I replied. I'd heard the story a million times, but to calm her nerves, I would have said anything. As she began to pack our things, she started telling the far-fetched story for the 100 millionth time. "It was down by where Red plants his peanuts now. That used to be where Papa Red, Aunt Eleanor, Aunt Geneva, and Uncle Pat used to live. You don't remember, but there used to be an old house in that field. That was the house they were raised in. Aunt Eleanor was the oldest, and Papa Red was the baby. Because Aunt Geneva and Uncle Pat were twins, they're both in the middle. Every day in the summer, when the kids were out of school, they'd all have to work the fields while your great-grandpa Maurice and Grandma Sally went to work for white folks in town. That Saturday morning started off like every Saturday morning. They all got up around 4 a.m. Aunt Eleanor fixed breakfast for everyone. Uncle Pat and Papa Red got the tools, and Aunt Geneva collected all the baskets and crates. As Mama moved with urgency, folding clothes, putting them in suitcases, I unintentionally completed the next line of her story, the story I'd heard so many times before. It slipped out like hot butter. "Around 5 o'clock is when they'd go out to the fields," I blurted. Standing there in silence, seconds after the words came spewing from my mouth, I wondered if she heard me. "Boy, I thought you said you never heard this story before." Luckily for me, Ricky always seemed to have perfect timing. He came to the door with an all-too-familiar look on his face. "What's up, Ricky?" Mama asked with regret in her tone. Sis, let me hold $40 before we get on the road," he said with no shame. $40? I shouted without thinking. 2 strikes in less than 2 minutes. At that rate, Mama was sure to break a switch before we pulled out of the driveway. "Boy, if you don't keep your mouth shut, do you have a job?" "No, ma'am," I said with my head held low. "Yeah, stay out of grown folk business," Ricky said, while twisting off the cap of another bottle of beer. "Now don't you start, Ricky. You know you still owe me $10 from 2 weeks ago," said Mama as she went to the mason jar where she kept all of her tips from her job. "I know, sis, but to my defense, don't I always pay you back with interest? I just can't be buying cigarettes in New York. They cost too much." "Here, Ricky, you know you're not being a good role model for your nephew, right?" Mama said while placing a whole lot of 1s and a few 5s into his reaching hand. The conversation got ugly when Ricky mentioned my daddy, a guy I'd spoken to on the phone now and then but hardly ever saw. Like always, talk of him between the two was razor sharp. In the softest voice he could muster, which wasn't soft at all due to drunkenness, my uncle asked Mama if she was receiving child support yet. And just as I'd predicted, and didn't allow to spill out my mouth this time, thank goodness, Mama said in her normal tone, "Hell no, and I'm not thinking about him or his money." I hadn't seen my daddy in so long. For all I knew, he could have been the new school janitor, whom I resembled, according to Big Ray, or a construction worker digging holes in the ground on the side of the street. Of course, he'd be the guy operating the backhoe, not the man holding the stop slow down sign. That would be way too simple for him. Whatever the case, it had been too long since I'd last seen him. After Uncle Ricky collected his weekly allowance, the adults made necessary phone calls. Mama called my school to verify that there wasn't any important work or test that needed to be taken before we left. I was relieved that I wasn't going to be seeing Raymond for a while. From across the yard and through all the junk in their backyard, I saw my friend Kenya coming over as we loaded the station wagon. I always wondered why they never used the front door to the tiny trailer. They had everything from old television sets to two-legged couches that stray cats slept on. "Here come your little girlfriend," Ricky announced as the station wagon springs went down with each suitcase he shoved in. For some reason, he'd decided to bring nearly every piece of clothing he owned. Mama packed more than enough clothes for me as well. I thought that maybe it was a sign that I would be staying the summer. "I heard that, Ricky," Kenya said while coming through the old shaky metal gate that separated the 2 yards. With little time left before the station wagon hit the road, Kenya and I left him and walked to our favorite spot. It was a swing we'd hung from a thick branch on a big oak tree near the creek. We fished and crabbed in the water hole all the time. It was located at the end of a downward path that went through a heavily wooded area. The path was right across the street from where we lived. "I just wanted to come down here in private to tell you to be safe and to give you this," said Kenya as she swung. From her pocket, while still swinging, she pulled out what looked to be a candy wrapper. Taking a closer look, I saw that it was a 4-leaf clover encased in plastic. I wonder how she knew that I was leaving. "Thank you. How'd you know?" "Well, for one, I just saw Ricky loading the station wagon, and for two, your mama called my mama. She asked if she could keep an eye on the house while you all were gone." "What about this?" I said while admiring the green leaf. "Just keep it safe while you're in the big city and don't lose it. I'll want it back when you come home. They say that it brings good luck. Maybe you'll use it for something." "Okay," I said while putting the leaf in my wallet. Before I could say thanks again, something happened. Kenya leaped from the swing and landed close in front of me. Our faces were nearly touching. While staring straight into her big brown eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. I saw Kenya, the beautiful, kind person that she is. Our faces moved in closer. She closed her eyes. Then, suddenly, Mama's voice came crashing through the woods. "Travis! Travis Emerson, come on, boy, we're waiting on you." Without a word, our eyes and hands communicated goodbyes. Everything was calm. All that could be heard was the rope from the swing rubbing hard against the tree limb as it creaked back and forth. At the station wagon, Uncle Ricky was already settled into the back seat. Papa Red would be driving first. Mama went to the passenger side. "Ricky," said Red as I scooted back on the cloth seat while fastening my safety belt, "you was supposed to drive first. Why'd you go and drink all that beer like a doggone fish?" For a second, I wondered what a drunken fish would be like. "Come on, Daddy. You know good and well I drive better after I throw a couple back." As the two began the long trip arguing, I felt bad for Mama as she sat quietly, staring out of the passenger window. Thinking about Aunt Eleanor, I'm sure. throw a couple back. I already told you if you get caught drinking and driving again, I'm leaving you in jail. And I'm definitely not paying all that money again to help get your license back. I already told you that wasn't my fault. That cop followed me from the club, pulled me over 2 blocks from the house, and said he stopped me for erratic driving. Ricky, that's beside the point. Mama broke her silence. People die every day by drunk drivers, and the drunks always seem to walk away without a scratch. As I remembered, Kenya's mom had been in several minor accidents caused by her drunk driving. Mama said she must have had an angel by her side. She'd never killed or hurt anyone or herself. She'd knocked down a few mailboxes, but never anything serious. She did run over Kenya's dog a few times. Didn't kill him, though, just broke his leg so he couldn't chase cars anymore, which was bad because I absolutely loved watching him through the bus window in those early mornings as he barked like crazy while chasing the school bus. I liked seeing him run after the bus, so I guess it was bad for me. But for the bus driver, it was a happy day when she saw old Duke dragging about in the yard. He did die eventually from parvovirus.